Well, thank you, Joachim, and thank you all. I feel like a TED Talk. You know, I always wanted to give a TED Talk. You guys like TED Talks? The big screen is pretty cool for that. I think it has one drawback. You cannot see the bottom line, right? But that's, I guess, the setup we have to deal with here. I'm very happy to be with you here, and I do have to apologize. You will not see a single model result. There will be no cost function. No data assimilation model. In fact, there might not be a single data point in my talk, right? So it's a very different talk. So sit back, relax, close your computers, just listen in and enjoy the journey. So I come from this place called GEOMAR. I'm actually a colleague of this man here up front. Your famous colleague here, so he works us. And at GEOMAR, we are quite a few scientists. They always say we are 1,000 people, but I think we're only 400 scientists. There's probably clerks and things counted. What we're trying to understand, just like many of you, the physical, chemical, biological, and geological process of the ocean. So we're a marine institute. But we're fortunate in Kiel that we also have a university that I teach at, so I'm also a professor at the university. And we also have other great institutions, like the Kiel Institute for the World Economy, that thinks about economic affairs. And in the faculties of the universities, we work with economists, with politicians, with lawyers, with philosophers. So I'm going to give you a not-so-technical talk, a bit more a policy talk. And so look at these pictures. What do they have to do with operational oceanography? I'm not going to give it away, except, Joachim, I like that lower right one. That's supposed to be a research vessel, We're so proud on building research vessels. They always look like the old ones, right? So I really like that design. Think about the future in a different way, right? Now, this is not too far from here, and, a country where some famous people live. You know where that country is? Just Monaco, right? And it's Princess Charlene and Prince Albert, right? But people love Monaco, maybe more so than Mallorca. I think people like Mallorca too, but in Monaco you have one advantage, you pay low taxes. So a lot of people want to go there, and they're running out of land very quickly, as you can see. And if the French, who gave the land to the Monegasques, if you ask the French, can we get more land to build more apartments? They're like, uh-oh, no way. We already have enough tax escapees. So what the Monegasques are thinking of is actually building cities into the ocean. That's not my picture, it's their picture, right? So and we've seen it in other places of the world that people, if things become tight on land, you move out into the ocean, right? Now, operational oceanography, I'm sure, has something to do with that, and there's some other things I'm going to... Now, we always hear, we just heard in the last talk some of the challenges, So many people on the planet, maybe pollution, I'll speak about that in a second, too. So the way I look at the ocean, not just from an operational oceanography perspective, is that there's many people on the planet, lots of light in Mallorca here, right? So, and lots of people on the planet probably change the environment, including the ocean. So ocean change, but also a lot of people like the ocean for resources, and you've seen some talks about that, and risks. We just heard about things like pollution events, but also tsunamis that on the last talk gave you that horrible accident in Japan. So we're doing science around that. We're trying to understand the current, past, and future ocean change, and operational oceanography is just a piece of it. Marine resources, sustainable uses of interest to us, and hazards as well. And you can imagine. And what's really exciting is to have a multidisciplinary team of experts working with us in Kiel, which is, I think, really exciting. So we do stuff from ocean discovery to sustainable development. So these are the 4 questions I'm going to ask you. And if you think you know all the answers to this, you can maybe open up your computer and do your emails, or you walk on the beach. And if you're interested to enjoy the journey with me, then we're going to ask these 4 questions, and we'll see how I do with time. So it's a dummy guide to the ocean acronym soup, and you'll send in a second. So I'll try to explain to you all these acronyms that you heard in the last 2 weeks, and try to make some sense of them. So why is science or ocean observing actually internationally organized? What did Joachim and all of the colleagues made a big effort to get all of you here to Mallorca from around the world? You have to travel a far distance, you get jet lagged, they put you up in a horrible hotel, you have to eat all the food. No, the hotel is wonderful. But why is it? Why is it? Ever thought about that? It's a lot of work, right? You're going to work with all those people around the planet. Can it not just come to his institute or my institute and do the work there or wherever you are? And I think it is because some problems that we're trying to do are just so difficult that Joachim and his team just cannot do by themselves, although they can do a lot, right? And I'm sure that's true for your institutes as well. So some things that we do are just so hard, difficult, global in span, that you really need to do global collaboration. We enjoy it at times, but it's also a burden. It's extra work, right? So you don't do it voluntarily. If you can do it all in your institute, go for it, right? But some questions, and some of you are interested in questions which are just harder. So it needs that international engagement. So I'm going to give you an example, one example that I'm going to share with you how that's done internationally. So internationally, there's an organization called the International Council for Science, or ICSU. And what ICSU does, it's trying to bring scientists around the world together to work on these problems, to think about these problems that unite scientists. And ocean observing, operational oceanography is one of those things that you can't do in Australia for everybody else in the globe. I know you guys in Australia do a lot, right? But if you were asked to do it for everybody, including the coastal waters of Mallorca, you'd say, wow, that's a bit hard, right? So that's why we try to get organized international. We have international summer schools. So ICSU is one of these frames that you organize and discuss science internationally. Now, ocean and climate research is a good example. So how is that actually internationally organized? Coming back to ICSU in a second. Anybody know? So I'll give you some acronyms. So there is an organization called the World Meteorological Organization. Anybody heard about that? Raise your hand. Good. Oh, wow. Okay, 2 hands up. Okay. And by the way, anybody heard about ICSU before? Who knows? Who has heard about ICSU, the International Council for Science? Much less known to this community, right? But WMO is known because, you know, if you want to predict the weather, that's difficult. You can't do it all in Melbourne in Australia. Or are you from Hobart? Where are you from? Yeah. Okay, original Belgium. So even in Belgium, you couldn't do the global weather, right? So so the world has come together at the UN, and the World Meteorological Organization is trying to improve weather forecast. But they realized ocean is also a part of that. So climate research, ocean research is also of interest to those who provide weather and climate. And WMO, pretty old organization, started in 1951. So, and they have many things they do. They have climate research, observations, ocean observing systems, and climate services. And again, I won't speak all about that, but this World Meteorological Organization is one of these acronyms that are important to us. Now, I want to give you a brief history of our climate research, and it comes back to ocean very quickly. And how did that come about? How did climate observations, ocean observations came about? And the first climate conference hosted by the World Meteorological Organization was in 1979. And what the colleagues did at that time, they set up, climate is difficult. They had some ideas that climate might change, but it wasn't so obvious that the Australian, the Belgian, and the German opinion, single opinion, was the right answer. So the nations around the globe said, we've got to have some understanding, and they started what they call the World Program, which pretty quickly started the World Climate Research Program. So it's a global effort to try to understand that. And it was actually the beginning of something that you guys probably do know, the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change. But it came out of a question of societies that were wondering, is climate change happening? Is it real? Can we document it? And why is it there? Something that you guys deal with in operational oceanography much more on a day-to-day basis today, but at that time, there were many, many questions about that. So the second World Climate Conference was hosted in 1992. And in 1992, they realized if we ever want to prove that climate is changing or understand the regional elements of it, we must have an observing system. We're getting closer to operational oceanography. And the Global Climate Observing System really started in 1992. It's not very old. Not very old. And at the same time, they realized that the first insight that climate probably was changing, the scientists were increasingly saying that was probably true, and the politician decided maybe if you have to do something about it, let's generate what they call the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC, and that is nothing about science, that's the policy angle. That's where nations come together and say, okay, let's curb CO2 emissions, or let's do some other thing, build more dikes, whatever, adaptation, mitigation. But again, these things are not very old, started in the 90s. But what was critical, without observations, this would not work very well. The Third World Conference was held in 2009. Probably many of you were around but didn't notice that much because now climate has been everybody's mouth. There's lots of climate activities there, but the World Meteorological Organization only had 3 climate conferences. Those were the ones. And in 2009, they established what they call the Global Framework for Climate Services, and climate services is very close to your home, operational oceanography. That's one element of oceanography, operational oceanography, to provide things like forecasts for El Nino and things like that. Other circles call this climate services. So if you look at the history of that evolution, it really started up that in the beginning we didn't have much. We had a bit of the World Weather Watch, not very organized. The World Climate Programs tried to understand it. Later IPCC was generated. And then in the 90s, we at least had a recognition that ocean observing, climate observing was essential. And the IPCC was started. And now we have a more sort of fit-for-purpose system, which has observations, ocean observing, climate observation at the bottom, climate research in the middle, but very important is predicting and information for climate or ocean-sensitive sectors and learning something about it. You heard many talks over the last 2 weeks on this issue. Right? There's also the other track, which is the policy track, which is about changing behavior of humans. Reducing CO2, less pollution, safeguarding building codes and things like that. That's a more policy track called mitigation. So the Global Framework for Climate Services kind of sits there. So WMO and as some of you organizations that you guys work for, they really have societal drivers. It says somebody wants to know about the status of the ocean and how it's changing. Right? And then you have a complex system that we discussed a lot, and in the end, it's all about disaster risk reduction, safety, economic operations, resilience, economic prosperity, all the things that drives operational oceanography. This is just the climate version, right? That's the climate center, but it's the same motivation. You have needs, and then in the middle of it, what you discussed this week a lot is how the research go, how the data go, how the data and the models get fused, how you inform the community, and all the technical things around that. So, speaking specifically about the ocean, how is that then organized? You know that? So it's different, right? It's nothing about adjoints and about data points. It's about the frame within which we work, right? In our operational oceanography world. So again, a few more acronyms. So again, because it's been realized that these things don't fall out of the sky. Somebody has to do something about it, and if you want to do it in the global ocean, that's not so easy. So observations have this grand slide full of acronyms, and I won't go through all of them. But I already mentioned a few of them. So the Global Climate Observing System here in the middle, again, that nations set up because they wanted to be able to detect if the climate was changing, and if it's changing, is it regionally different? How big and how bad is it? So that's what STAT is. It's called GCOS, the Global Climate Observing System. But they realized that climate is not just changing on land, so there's a terrestrial piece, not only in the atmosphere, but also in the ocean. So GOOS, the Global Ocean Observing System, had dual motivations. One comes to understand the ocean and ocean change for the climate agenda, and the other motivation comes from the more operational oceanography needs, that is, to really build up resilience in society, so supporting transport, safety at sea, many other actors in the ocean space, not just about climate. So how is that then put together? So that's the Global Ocean Observing System, and the Global Ocean Observing System is supported, here's a man who works for these guys, by what's called the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission. Who ever heard that word? Awful, huh? IOC. You better know what that is. He sort of almost works for them. Anybody heard that thing? Yes. And it's part of UNESCO, United Nations Environmental, Social, and Cultural Organization. Educational. social and cultural organization. So education is what UNESCO does, and by some move of accident, they got the ocean, okay? So the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission is governments around the world get together and discuss ocean affairs, and there's some text about that. It's not that old, started in 1960. It's a little bit older than me, but not that much. So in the scheme of things, a bit younger. And we have GEO, the Group on Earth Observations. Anybody heard about that? You heard about that. So again, these acronym soups, right? They fly all over the world and nobody ever knows what they are, right? So 2 people knew what the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission is. Only 1 person knows what GEO is. And the Group of Earth Observations is a partnership of, again, 100 nations. And they're just like the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, try to get organized to get a view of how we can best observe our environment. Not just in the ocean, just across spheres, right? That's what GEO does. So it's similar to IOC, but a little different. And they together have what's called the Blue Planet Initiative, which connects oceans and society. So we're getting closer to ocean, right? So you have WMO, World Meteorological Organization, IOC, the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, and GEO, the Group on Earth Observations. Those 3 are big organizations, and they sponsor some ocean stuff. And the ocean stuff is about integrating maritime services, we heard about that, service for coastal communities, healthy ecosystems and food security, but also services for the blue economy, the kind of societal dimensions around operational oceanography. And then they do things in the middle of it, and you see here what the Minish Mission is, and one of the things that they support, or which is part of their mission, is the Global Ocean Observing System. And they put nice pictures up, which are not too different from the ones you've seen at this meeting, right? So why are we doing operational oceanography? You know, we're supporting energy issues, transportation, disaster warning, we just heard about that. Fisheries, wasn't so much while I was here, ecosystem services, and coastal affairs as well. So again, the Blue Planet Initiative supports that. Now, GOOSE, the Global Ocean Observing System, who's heard about that? GOOSE. Hands up. Better a few more. Excellent. We're not doing so bad, Marcel. Whatever you did, they got it, right? At least in parts. So it's a permanent global observing system for oceans, modeling and analysis. So a lot of people think GOOSE is just about putting stuff in the ocean, right? It is about that, but it's also about fusing that with our insights from modeling, and that's where all the adjoints and things come in, right? So that's part of that. So it's an international system that we think about. And it certainly promotes forecasting, but also capacity building around the world. So that's what the Global Ocean Observing System is. It's organized like every organization, has some stuff like a steering committee, and it actually has 3 parts of it. It thinks about physics and climate, biological and ecosystem. Here's a man who is interested in that, but also biogeochemistry. So those are the 3 dimensions that GOOSE organizes itself on, just because we know there's different challenges in different communities, but they collectively do that, and then they have regional alliances. So there's a Euro GOOSE, there's probably an Australian GOOSE, there's an US version of that, and then they have many other things, which I don't want to point out to, but I will say one more word about JCOM, the last acronym here. That's the Joint Commission of WMO, so the weather guys, IOC, the ocean guys. So these guys get together and they talk, because if you want to have an observing system operating well, more often than not, it serves both the weather and the ocean community. So there's many technical things, like if the Chinese go out and make an observation, if the Belgian guys go out and make an observation, and the French, we better make sure that they use the same standards. So it's about standards, and it's about open data sharing. So JCOM does a lot of that. So it promotes the use of state-of-the-art technologies and capabilities. Argo is one of the systems, gliders you've heard about, things like that. It's responsive to the evolving needs, meaning if new technology shows up or new demands come in, JCOM thinks about, can we do something, again, internationally, coordinated about it. And it certainly includes outreach and capacity building, because, and we were so happy to have many nations represented here. Some nations like Germany are very capable. We're kind of lucky in some sense. Other nations who are here from, say, the African continents or some Asian regions, you don't have so much capacity. So it's about how can we share our insights and capacities, training summer schools like this. So now, and what they collectively do, they try to advance progress by international meetings. So you guys go to summer schools, which is perfect. But Joachim and I, we sometimes go to other meetings where we debate advances in our fields, like in operational oceanography or sustained observing. And there have been a series of conferences, so not a climate conference. Now these are ocean observing conferences called OceanOps. Could almost guess, right? OceanOps. Anybody heard about OceanOps before? These OceanOps conferences? Oh, we're not doing so bad, at least 30%. So there's interesting news. The first one was in '99, not too far from here, on the Mediterranean, in San Rafael. The second one, OceanOps 09, I will speak a bit more about the outcome of that, so 2009. And the good news is, one is around the corner, 2019. Right? So it's coming up, and I'll speak just a little bit about that. OceanOps 09, so here what you do, actors like you, who are interested in operational oceanography or ocean information for climate, for fisheries, whatever it might be, we get together and discuss and debate what to do. And in '99, we figured out we're good in physics, we're getting better in chemistry, but we're very poor in biology, and we really didn't have a good way to articulate over what we do. We said, we love Argo, or there were no gliders then, or it was just coming up. So we're more network-driven. So then what came out of that conference, an activity that we say we need a framework under which we think about sustained ocean observing. And we call this the framework for ocean observing. Pretty simple, huh? So the framework of ocean observing is a very simple animal. It basically says, you have requirements. This could be your beach in front of Mallorca. You know, is it going to be eroded? It could be a tsunami forecast. You want to be safeguarding your resilience. It could be energy from the ocean. It could be combating plastic pollution. We just had a requirement on the last talk. And these requirements sort of then should be met by observing. So you go in the ocean and do some stuff. You know, you observe the ocean with satellites, with planes, with robots, with ships, whatever there might be. But then it's important, once you've done all of that, that information gets shared and used and put against data and products. And a lot of the operational oceanography that you guys have been discussing is how can we take some observations and turn them into useful products? Because in the end, if you have a question, that's the inputs, you better get an answer. And so the framework of ocean observing says unless you have all the boxes in some way functioning, your fellow citizens will not be too happy with you. They say, oh, I love your robots in the ocean. They look beautiful, and I wish I can go on a cruise and put them in the water. But what did they ever tell me? You know, did you ever really answer a question that I asked you? Like, is sea level rising? Is there more pollution in the ocean? Things like that, right? So you got to connect everything. That's what this thing does. And we decided to organize ourselves around the central ocean variable, which I think you heard lots about, so I'm going to skip that over. You know already what that is. And what I just want to make sure that these essential ocean variable come in different forms. Some are very mature, like temperature. We know what it is. We know how to calibrate it. We have many platforms around it. And some are very conceptual, like genotypes. But it's not unimaginable that in 20 years, we have a global genetic ocean observing system. I think we will, right? But it's early days for that. In temperature, we're much more advanced. So they come in different levels of maturity. So if you look at that framework more complex, then there's requirements, what to measure, these EUVs come in, then there is this string of stuff. You know, some people call it like the wet European Space Agency or the wet NASA or the wet JAXA or Chinese Space Agency, all the stuff in the wet ocean. And it's really important to make sure that data gets shared, assembled, and information gets produced. So OceanOps 19 is coming up. Good news for you guys. Get ready. It's going to be in beautiful Hawaii. Just as beautiful as here, right? And what it will try to do is make sure that we better connect our observing capabilities with what society wants. I think a debate that you had a lot to contribute here during the summer school. So I definitely think that many of you will be interested to join us in September 16 to 20 in 2019. It's kind of really around the corner. Now, I want to speak a little bit about our services, and then we'll do sustainable development. So services is what drives you guys a lot. It drives the climate in terms of the framework for climate services, and the IPCC, that's the climate assessment. These are talked as services, and the latest version of these is down here in the Sustainable Development Goals. So I want to speak a little bit about ocean observing and sustainable development. And I'm going to show a picture like this for Joachim. So I'm not sure whether I can spot Mallorca, but the pixels are a little bit too small. But I think you see here world population map. And isn't it interesting how different it is around the globe? But if you have to identify one pattern, you can probably see that somehow humans like coasts. You don't mind being at a coastal beach resort either, right? It seems much more beautiful, except we're stuck in a room all day, than if this was 10 kilometers inland. Right? So humans like coasts for a number of different reasons. And what you also notice, if you look at the 15 megacities, if you do good counting, 12 of them are coastal megacities. So the largest development and growth in human population is in coastal zones. That's just an interesting number. So you put some numbers around it. So I was born in 1960. There were 3 billion people on the planet. Today, we have 7.5. So in my lifetime, the number of people on our planet doubled. That's quite amazing. In fact, I don't think ever in Earth's history that happened. That in one generation, you double the amount of humans. Now, if you're a hard-believing Christian, you could say Adam and Eve. I remember that. Right now. So it's exciting times, and and if you look at the forecast, we're either going to go to 10 billion. It's the most likely forecast. We could be 16, maybe only 6, but 10 is the sort of most likely forecasted number from the United Nations, and yet, one planet. Now, the colleagues that investigate the dark matter down there with the LIGO thing, right, and the astronomers, they always say, and I think Carl Sagan said that too, and they say, and Steve Hawkins just a couple of months ago said, he thinks in one generation we're going to move to another planet. Now, I like Hawkins, but I'm not so sure he's right on that one. I think for the next couple of generations we're going to be stuck with this one thing, right, which is one ocean. So the question then is, how can we think about a system that respects development, that respects the planetary boundaries? There's only so much ocean and fish and coast to go around, right? So you got to be mindful about that. So, and I like the Oxfam version of it because all of you want water, income, education, resilience, voice, jobs, energy, social equity, gender equality, health, and food. We're going to have food in a second. So that's what keeps the life going for all of us, everybody on the planet, right? So as we get more people, that inner circle is going to grow, but on the outside, the planet will not grow. We just have one planet, one ocean, right? So the question is, what is the safe and just operating space for humanity, and what does ocean observation have to do with that? So I'll make this ocean for you, for Joachim, okay? If you're in Mallorca, it's very obvious to you that ocean is a life support system because it provides you with oxygen, food, biodiversity, climate stability, and sense of place. So the ocean is part of our life support system, and I just want to make one little throwaway comment on the sense of place issue. In most hotels in Mallorca, when you come to the registration desk, you put your credit card down, you put your passport down, and then the question you get is, oh, sir, you want a garden view or an ocean view? And most of you will probably say, I'll take the ocean view. And he says, I have a bit of bad news for you. It's 20 euros more per night. And you say, I came all the way to Mallorca, 20 euros, doesn't matter, right? So you pay extra. So economically speaking, crazy as we are, we pay extra to look over the ocean. And I can guarantee you, if you go to Shanghai, don't do it. Go for the garden view. Go for the garden view. I'll show you a picture of that in a second. Blue economy. Europe, and it's true in China, it's true in America, it's all about economic growth, which is crazy, right? But that's what the talk is about. So it's about income, markets, jobs, technologies, investment, and they look to the ocean, supporting operational oceanography to help with safe oil and gas extraction, to renewable energies, fishing. But what is the biggest blue economy? In Germany, in Mallorca, in Europe, in China, in the US? Is it fishing? Shipping? You know, we ship 90% of the goods around the ocean. Seems like a good industry to me. Is it oil and gas? Wind farms? What is the biggest ocean industry? Say again? Yes, thank you. It's obviously tourism. It's very clear in Mallorca. It's very clear in Germany. It's very clear in Europe. It's clear in China. That is the biggest ocean industry you have, which is interesting because that means something about where you want to develop to, right? Tourists will not come to the industrial ocean. They come to the beautiful ocean. Right? So ocean and societies, it's about equity, diversity of lifestyles, institutions and governance. I'll do a bit shorter on this one. That is a very exciting space to talk to lawyers and philosophers about, but I'm going to do it a bit, just mention one thing. Seafaring nations are open societies because they've seen different cultures, and you see that the world is a diverse place, so ocean connects cultures, which is a good thing. Sometimes, and that's also a good thing, you know, if you look at the US, for example, it was immigrated by lots of refugees from Europe, right? And that's what makes the US proud. They're like, okay, we're a country of immigrants, right? And these days, somehow, we don't like them anymore. Yeah, so ocean connects people. So, and we put this thing in an ocean atlas if you want to read about this interaction between ocean and sea and ecosystem services and humanity here on this side. If you want to read more about that, pick up our ocean atlas. You can get it on the web. You can order free copies for Cape Town, for Bangladesh, for Germany. It's all there. But what I want to speak about is sustainable development. So the sustainable development is about the 5 Ps. People, you and me, our prosperity, our future, peace, no prosperity for sure, planet and partnership. And they came up with these 17 sustainable development goals. Who knows about those? Anybody in the room knows about SDGs? Hands up, be honest about it. Ah, my Cape Town colleagues, great. 1, 2. Okay, we got to work harder here on this one, okay? That is actually your future. And so the nations around the planet came together and decided 2 years ago what would be good goals to have. No poverty. Sounds good to me on the planet. No hunger. Now, we have to go to this buffet in a little while. There'll be no shortage of hunger there. Access to health, quality education, gender equality, clean water, energy, economic growth, infrastructure, reduce inequalities, sustain cities, responsible consumption patterns. And here we go, climate, ocean, biodiversity, and peace, and sharing and means. Now, when this was negotiated, I'm sure Joachim had some say in this. We said, there should be an ocean goal, right? Joachim, were you for the ocean goal? So you know what the German diplomat said? You know, Martin, we like the ocean, but it's kind of complicated. We want to keep the goals to 10. 10 commandments, 10 goals sounds good. If you just have 10 of those, probably ocean will go. Now, Joachim is a smart guy. I did some pushes and we didn't get anywhere. How come that we have this ocean goal there? Very simple. You're at the UN. How is voting at the UN? Every country, one vote, right? The other part of voting at the UN is everybody has to be in favor of it. They usually go by unanimity, right? Everybody has to say yes. So the small island development states, like Palau, like Mauritius, you know, Balear is not a state, so you couldn't do it. But, you know, all the island states basically said, you know, our future is just about one thing. It's the ocean, right? And if you guys come up with a great plan that looks wonderful to a German diplomat that doesn't say ocean on it, we're just going to say no. Ever since then, Germany loves the ocean goal. So education, that's where we have summer schools, and life below water is one of the elements of sustainable development. And it is important. It's a future of our planet. I don't think there will be a future of our planet without ocean, and operational oceanography helps us to make sure that there will be a healthy ocean for the years to come. That's one of the dimensions why you're doing it. So it has a goal, conserve and sustainably use the ocean, seas, and resources for sustainable development. There's targets, you can look at them. But how to measure progress against targets? That's where you guys come in. Because the politicians need indicators. They need to see, is sea level rising, yes or no? Is the ocean becoming warmer, yes or no? Is the number of fish going up or down? Can we do more wind farms or less? It's indicators that counts. And unfortunately, at the international level, there's no good agreement around ocean indicators. If you look at the ones which are agreed on there, they're really poor. I invite you to check that. Now, there have been people who suppose some. It's called the Ocean Health Index, around food, fishing, products, carbon storage, coastal protection, tourism, sense of place, economies, clean waters, biodiversity. Sort of good, complicated framework. I encourage you to read at it. What's interesting, if you do that, if you generate an index for each coastal state, you can look up your state now. Cape Town, not so bad, you know, so 60% like the globe, 60% okay, right? Germany, around that same. Some countries, US got even better, 70 or so. Actually, Germany was pretty good, we got 80, don't know why. But the pattern is interesting. You look at the development, the poorest nation on the planet, and they all have poor coasts. So that shows you something about environmental status already. Even the poor nations already degraded their coastal system. So it's interesting. So these targets are good because now it shows you, if you do some development, help them to clean up the areas, maybe we can turn some reds to green. That would be the idea, right? That's what indicators do. But they need ocean observing, operational oceanography to support them for that. They don't have that. You guys are no force in that system. They don't have indicators that they can put down at the UN level. So you need to work with that if you want to be relevant to the politicians. You're not right now. And they also do conferences. I dressed up for that. It was really fun. It was this June in New York, the first conference ever at the United Nations on Ocean, where the nations come together to discuss that. Operational oceanography was sort of present a little bit, but it wasn't very visible. Right? It's all about plastics, pollution, but you guys have something to say, so I think we can be a bit more visible there. And what they said, our future call for action. Action, right? Do something. Now, I'm just a poor scientist. I said, well, gee, what can I do? I mean, and so what we did two pieces. We did this Ocean Atlas, and we also have a MOOC, a massive open online course that we invite the global community to learn about ocean and ocean sustainability as one contribution to better the situation. You guys have ocean observing system and real-time ocean information. That's a good service. Did you register that? I think you actually did, Goose, but not as visible as we should have. You know, it was an open call for the nations. Why don't you go in and make a big splash and say, we can provide you with indicators for sustainable development. We missed that opportunity. And in the US, it was hosted by Sweden and Fiji, but it happened in the United States. But the United States ocean organizations like the Oceanography Society and the incoming president, like AMS, nobody was there. There was not a single newspaper article, headline press in New York Times, Washington Post on that conference. I thought this was very disappointed. I think we failed our marine community by really not stepping up to the plate and, you know, talking about why the ocean is important for our future and all the great things that operational oceanography already is contributing to that goal. Somehow we're disconnected from that. It is a problem. I think eventually your PhD positions and postdocs will depend on that. So now we do a little bit of that in Kiel, and let's see, I do one more click, and I have a little film I want to share with you because I like it so much.
This is the ocean. Vast and endless. It encircles the planet, covers 71% of the Earth's surface, and provides more oxygen than all the rainforests combined. It holds unmatched and sometimes untouched natural resources, more than we could ever imagine. Here life began and has been sustained for millennia, harboring secrets we have yet to unlock. This is the ocean, the source of food and energy and the highway for international commerce. Its shores are home to 40% of humanity that lives within 100 kilometers of the coast. It provides sustenance, livelihoods, and links our global economy. But this is also the ocean, a vast yet finite system, bearing the telltale signs of our careless lifestyles.
Go for garden view.
It is highly stressed through our growing interventions and is groaning under the burden of pollution and climate change. How can we be good stewards of our planet so that we and future generations can live in harmony with the ocean? Can we use our understanding of the ocean system and human system to change our actions to support human life within safe limits so that the ocean can continue to sustain its eco-services for us, as it has for so long? Come join us and learn about the ocean and what it means to you. When we put our knowledge together, Can we use ocean system thinking to arrive at more sustainable, smarter interactions and solutions leading to better governance?
So that was just a little PR thing for this massive open online course. We ran it twice, meaning 4,000 people around the globe sign up. There are chat rooms. You can discuss issues with them. It was really fun to discuss issues around the ocean around the globe. There were great colleagues from South Africa participating and so on. We had a great time. And now you can still get all the lectures. They're online. You can look at them at YouTube. They even we put them on a Chinese website, so you can even access them if you not have access to YouTube. Now, my last do I have 5 minutes, Joachim? Can I? 5? Good. I want to actually, my last point is I want to speak about what's called the ocean value chain. Ocean value chain. So what the hell is that? So, and I made this up a bit. There's some other versions of that around. And I basically look at you guys and say, if you go back to your country, right, and you want to, in your country, say, we need more resources for operational oceanography, how do you do that, right? And I think a frame you can engage people is like this. You basically say, hey, I mean, the ocean is exciting. We need to discover, map, observe. You know, we go out with deep diving submarines. The Chinese have a new one. You go deep down to 6 kilometers, see some great things. You know, so there's a lot of stuff in the ocean we haven't even seen yet. And your friends in your community love you and said, I want to be a marine scientist because you get to find new things. Right? It's one of these last frontiers on our planet that we discover still new things. And we start to map the ocean. And in Godae, we're trying to actually make these maps change, right? So we're looking not just the temperature distribution, but we're looking how it's changing over time. So observing, mapping is a very key activity. Mostly are scientists involved. Now, if you go to university or at GEOMAR, where I work, we say, we want to understand, right? And I never liked the way in English we're called oceanographers. That means you draw a map and you're done. Why can I not be an oceanologist? Logic means understanding, like a meteorologist, right? But we're oceanographers. It's the wrong box. I don't want to be in that. In Russian, we are oceanology. Much nicer, right? I'm not sure about Chinese. Anyway, so it's about the logic behind it. It's understanding equations. Why is something happening? Why is it warming? Why? So it's the why question that academic institutions do. Again, we're in the science track. And sometimes you get lucky, as in physical oceans. In chemistry too, in biology it's a bit harder. Sometimes you can use your understanding, put it in a computer code, call it a model, and you can actually predict. That is pretty cool. There's many parts of science where you cannot do that, where our understanding is just not good enough. But in our science, in particular in physical oceanography, also chemical oceanography, you can do that. That's why you can do operational oceanography, because you can actually say something about the next 2 weeks or 3 months or years or decades, sometimes even a century ahead, right? So we're in the sciences in a well-deserved, in a well-articulated field of science, I would say. Now, and then, you know, you write great papers in high published journals like Nature and Science, and you go to politicians in your country and they're like, what the hell is Nature and Science? I don't know what that is. And then he says, and you tell him, it's the most premier journal in the science. And they say, okay, really, show me your paper. So he gets your Nature paper, 3 sentences, and he's like, look, I mean, I don't understand a word here, right? So what we're most proud of, which gets you a professorship, right, is a series of Nature and Science paper doesn't do any good with the policy because they can understand that. It's not their language, it's technical language, it's our language, right? So what you need to do, you need to take that information and transform it, assess it, put it in a language that the community, society cares about, policy cares about, right? So this is transformation. So in climate science, that's what the IPCC is supposed to be doing. In operational oceanography, these are the services that you're delivering on the iPhone or on the iPad or on some other electronic device. It's not the Nature paper, it's the service, right? It's that, it's speaking to the assessment. And sometimes if you do that, you get lucky that your government or your policymaker actually might change its action. More often than not, they will do something else. They say, I like what you know about the changing ocean in your country, right? But he says, but you know, if I really have to ban plastics or reduce the amount of fishing quota or tell people not to settle in the coast, I need more information. I don't think you have done your work. So he'll get back to you and say, do more observing, do more understanding, give me better models, so the next assessment you give me speaks to the point more clearly. Right? So this value chain is an ongoing discussion and dialogue that we're all part of. And if you have one part not working, there's no value in this. Right? There's no societal value in this if you stop one thing. It has to be all being connected and working. So in the sciences, we talk about sustainable development goals maybe here, or some operational safety at sea, some resilience measure here. And then the assessment, there's a thing called the World Ocean Assessment. Who's ever heard about the World Ocean Assessment? Half a hand up. Isn't it terrible? IPCC, hand up. Who knows about the IPCC? 80%. And the IPCC is a technical document that reports to UNFCCC. It doesn't even report to the General Assembly. This thing reports to the General Assembly, talks to the heads of state. And nobody knows about it, not even you. It's terrible. We're, again, failing a community by not producing an assessment that is actually helpful. Right? It's very terrible. You guys can do better, I'm sure. Now, there's observing. I talked about the Global Ocean Observing System. GEO, AtlantOS is what I do. And then in the sciences, you have all these science programs, many acronyms. And down there, you have Mercator, Ocean, and Copernicus. That's the European version, and there's a US version and an Australian version. And so there's these services. But you see all these acronyms you can put in this value chain if you like, because they have different sorts of functions in this value chain, which is really critical. So, and there's science that integrates that, what we do in Kiel and Future Earth does. So last slide. I'm optimistic. Because I think if you think about ocean values, if you think about the ocean value chain, if you put our heads together, you guys have had great 2 weeks of discussing, debating what we can do better in operational oceanography. So if we make that information available to our colleagues in society and decision makers and say, I know something about the ocean, I can help you. Come up with a better solution, I think we can be in good shape. Thanks for listening.
Thanks very, very much, Martin.